Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sigma 7 webinar, The Future Growth of Intelligence Fusion, What's Next? So in terms of agenda for the webinar, we're going to start off with introductions and then a brief history of intelligence fusion. We'll talk about the acquisition of intelligence fusion by Sigma 7, as well as the Sigma 7 value proposition, what's new in the intelligence fusion software, as well as what's coming next. And then at the end, we'll take questions. And please send your questions throughout the session, but they will be answered at the end. So today you've got myself and Andrew Tait. Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, and very happy to be here with all of you today. So my name is Andrew Tait, as Michael said. I am the integrated risk leader sitting at the Sigma 7 parent level. I joined the company last year to come in and as we add capabilities and assets to make sure we're structuring them together and building solutions for clients in a different way. I've been lucky in my career to play a number of different roles, all in the risk space. So I started as a fire protection engineer with one of the big insurance companies, spent some time at one of the biggest brokers in the world as a broker and a risk consultant. Was on the client side, living in France as a risk manager for a big chem farm company over there. And then it's been consulting for the last 18 years. For me, and we're going to get into it today, but this whole journey is about how do we take the best tools, integrate them together to give better risk outcomes for you, and how do we help companies and the people within those companies more efficiently see and treat and manage problems. And that's why I'm really excited to be here today with Michael talking about IF and the future of risk. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. And for people who don't know me, so I'm Michael McCabe. I'm the Managing Director of Intelligence Fusion. Prior to this, I was the CEO and founder of Intelligence Fusion. My background is in British Army Intelligence Corps and then the private security sector, mainly focused in Iraq, but then with some maritime intelligence. And then I founded Intelligence Fusion 8.5 years ago, and we were acquired 8 months ago by Sigma 7. So I just want to chat a little bit about the brief history of Intelligence Fusion and where we actually came from as a company. So back in my days of working with Aegis, so Aegis were providing close protection to the United States Army Corps of Engineers. We used to actually create an intelligence picture using a tool called Falcon View. We'd then write our intelligence reports into a Word document, PDF them, and then disseminate them once a day. So we were just disseminating a snapshot of an intelligence picture. When I moved on to Olive Group, we'd then use Excel spreadsheets to actually collate incident data. We'd visualize them using Google Earth via KMZ files. But again, we'd be putting intelligence reports into Word documents, PDFing them, and again, disseminating them once a day. After that, in my my consultancy business, I tried using just KMZs in general to actually hold the data, because often what we were being asked by clients was they wanted to get access to our Excel spreadsheets. They wanted to see the historical data so they could do their own trend analysis, these sorts of things. And then that wasn't really an optimal way to disseminate intelligence. Not everybody had Google Earth. So fast forward to 2015. I founded Intelligence Fusion. We created the Intelligence Fusion 1.0 platform, which we used for 3 years. And the key point of that was it was the ability for us to actually disseminate a live intelligence picture, but also allow the clients the ability to dig into the historical data. So moving on to 2018 to 2023, that was the birth of Intelligence Fusion 2.0, which we used for 5 years. Very much map driven, as most intelligence platforms are, but we've done a lot of development over the years in relation to the platform. So we added the ability for clients to actually report their own instance in the platform, so they could visualize our data alongside their own data. We added a news feed within there. So the news feed, it's 80,000 news sources, 92% of which is in multiple languages, is accessible within 1 to 2 minutes of appearing online. And then we've effectively distributed it across the platform. So if you go into a country profile or a region profile or an actor profile, say, for example, it's your company name, the feed is actually using the keywords of your company name in that case. So it's actually pulling in news in relation to your organization. We've added a whole series of overlays, often very much client focused. We've added things like pipelines. We've ingested competitor intelligence feeds into our platform. We've built out a whole organization feature where clients can not only map their static assets, and we have some clients who have thousands and thousands of assets which they report in the platform. They can then set up geofences in relation to those assets and then receive incidents once an alert happens in relation to one of their assets. We've also created the ability to have a threat map and a threat grid based on the client's own definition of threat. And then within the profile selector, we have an actor service. So actors for us are anyone who features within our incident data. So it could be an individual, it could be a company, an organization, a terrorist group, an activist group. And then finally, we have the regions as well. So regions are made up of countries, and it's how the client sees the world. So say, for example, you're a client who says, I see the world in terms of a MENA region. We can create the MENA region within the Intelligence Fusion platform. So that's the development that we did over the course of about 5 years. And then 8 months ago, we were acquired by Sigma 7. So Andrew, do you want to sort of chat through what Sigma 7 is about and who was acquired as part of that process?
Absolutely. And so Sigma 7 was formed in May of last year. The two founders had the view that in the risk space, we had two options. We had the big companies who had risk advisory as one of their capabilities, and they generally went very broad, but kind of shallow. And that was the big brokers, the big financial accounting firms, all had a broad set of services. Part of the problem with that broad set is that they weren't the primary mission of the organization. So if you take a big broker with a strong advisory team, really the advisory team is helping to support the insurance placement and the insurance brokerage and the insurance mission, rather than a pure risk management mission. The other option you had were small boutique specialists who were very good, very deep at one thing, but didn't understand or didn't have visibility to the breadth of services that might be interesting or relevant to solve a problem. So the premise of Sigma 7 was, let's find those boutiques that are really solid, really strong, best in class, and recognized as so, and let's bring them together under one umbrella and platform, and build a way that we can bring the right services to each individual client's needs. And so on this list, you'll see the first 5 we've acquired, Intelligence Fusion certainly being an important one of them. But Paragon is fire protection engineers and natural catastrophe facility and risk engineering, 220 plus engineers around the world. They're used to doing work direct with clients, with insurers and others, and really help understand the property risk, the physical risk. RWH Myers is a forensic accounting firm. So how do we understand the so what, the financial so what of risk? And they're expert at putting that financial value on different risk profiles. Alico is very strong on the intelligence, but on the counterparty risk and the transactions and due diligence side of intelligence. So they're a very natural complement to Intelligence Fusion. RSM is the Resilience and Security Management Group. So in there, we've got security, we've got risk resiliency that includes business continuity, incident management, crisis management. We've got a full online training capability and video production ability. So we can build fit for purpose training to support all the risk matters that we're trying to influence. And then Intelligence Fusion is our platform where we're gluing all these services onto the already strong capabilities of IF and adding on other information so that we can really have that one view of the truth, that one center of truth for clients to really think about their portfolios globally and then go deep dive down to the site level. So more to come as we find other experts that are going to be meaningful and material to you as clients. And I think it's going to be a really interesting journey as we keep down the path.
And it's interesting from my perspective. So like we had 6 potential acquirers last year, and the reason I went with Sigma 7 was I really believe in what we're trying to achieve at Sigma 7. We are the largest independent risk management company in the world, and in terms of our value proposition, we help the client understand their risk profile better than anyone else because we have aggregated world-leading risk capabilities across risk engineering, forensic accounting, intelligence and security, cyber crisis management, training and business investigations, and we have a global footprint as well. Yeah, and, go on,
if I may, I'm going to jump in because that's you hit the nail on the head. It's one of the reasons I was happy to join last year. Is I've been working on this strategic risk advisory for the last 15 years. Usually within one of the big shops. And I always felt somewhat constrained in what I could bring, or I didn't have the tools. We were working in Excel and PowerPoint, and we were pulling things together as we went. And now I actually have a way to organize the arrows in my quiver differently and actually see risk in a much more intentional way. And with our mission being 100% client focused, we're not constrained by those others of sell more insurance or support more limit, or make sure that we're getting those spends protected as well. So it's a great mission we've got, I think, because it's all about what adds most value to the client.
And it's interesting sort of seeing the linkages between the different companies, because you've got Intelligence Fusion and Alico. So we're very much at that threat intelligence level, although, I'd say we kind of move into some of the operational and some strategic level intelligence, whereas Alico can do that very high level regulatory, legal intelligence. So that kind of fits quite nicely. You've got ourselves in RSM and the new security and resilience arm. So, our threat intelligence feeds into the security consultants and them understanding the threats around a client's asset. But even from a Paragon perspective, Paragon are risk engineers, and in part what they're looking at is, what does the threat profile look at this asset site, and we're feeding that sort of data. And then just to bring in RWH and Paragon, chatting to Rob, who's the president of Paragon, they go out and they'll do an audit of a site, and they'll say, right, looking at this factory, these are the potential exposure values that this potential incident may be. And by Paragon working with RWH Myers, who are forensic accountants, they can give them really accurate exposure values. So the learning curve for me has been absolutely huge, just kind of getting to grips with what we can do as a company. But it's really exciting to see all these parts starting to come together.
Yeah. Well, and if I may too, the other interesting thing is, if historically companies have a security team buying security solutions, you have security team buying security solutions, you have risk team buying risk and property engineering, you might have health and safety buying things. We can bring those together. We actually are having those instances where we're introducing those departments together on the client side, where they haven't done much work together because they haven't seen that there's overlapping of tools that can help them both with perhaps incrementally less spend. And to me, that's where, as we start to hit our full stride with pulling out some of these, the new trainings that we're developing, the leveraging of our, as you said, the security team, boots on ground, security design. We've got folks in the Ukraine, we've got folks in South Sudan right now, designing security protocols for clients. We start leveraging that with what we can do in IF. It's going to be fascinating.
And just to sort of visualize that for the attendees on the webinar. So just as an example, say this was a mining site. This just sort of shows you how we fit together as a company. So Intelligence Fusion is there to do asset mapping as well as threat intelligence monitoring. You've got the likes of Alico, who can work with the mining sites who do due diligence on their partners to help with them with market entry, look at sentiment analysis, as well as legal and regulatory analysis, as well as fraud and corruption investigations. You've got Paragon from an engineering risk survey and recommendation perspective, RSM, who can do crisis management design, security consultancy and training, and then RWH Myers, who are there to support the business interruption values and exposure analysis, as well as work with you, if ever an insurance claim comes up.
Yeah, and take it to the global level. If you have 45 of these assets around the world, which ones are maybe exposed by the same weather event? Which one are perhaps exposed by the same geographical or geopolitical risk? Looking at when Paragon goes and does their site visits, they'll give specific recommendations. You should change this piece of equipment. You should buy this piece of protection equipment. And they'll put a value on that. How much does it cost to invest in that change? But what are we protecting? What kind of business interruption loss or property loss are we avoiding? Take that up to the portfolio level. And again, with 30 plants, you might have a couple hundred of recommendations. And if we can help you look across those hundreds and see, where do we spend our next $2 million in risk investment? Where's the best place to spend it, and which site do we need to think of? Or take the Intelligence Fusion view of the world and some of the things Michael's going to speak of in a minute. How do we think about some of the new and emerging risks on our portfolio, not just our site? How do we think about wildfire? And do we need to do some different activities around that? How do we think about some of the threat actors that might be impacting us in a country, or the routes between sites? How do we translate that to our risk team, who are working with the logistics folks on transportation routes, but how do we take our global view of our risk and boil it down to where we act next? And again, I'll keep saying fascinating. To me, it's pulling these together. You can get such a good value add.
And historically, Intelligence Fusion, we could only go so far. We were there to provide threat intelligence to clients for them to understand what their surroundings are like, but also a bit of horizon scanning. Like an example, recently we had a mining client who trialed with us, and they said post-trial they were shocked to discover there was a trafficking operation around their location. They stated that the platform gave them back manual hours, which allowed them to take on further workload. But we've provided them with an understanding of the threats, but that's potentially where RSM could come in and actually support them and say, right, this is how you can respond to that trafficking operation.
Exactly.
So like since we've been acquired by Sigma 7, we now sit at 43 team members. We've had a lot of growth. So we've hired 4 more intelligence analysts. We've got a much larger software development team. We're in the process of hiring a much larger commercial team. But I mean, more broadly, when you look at the wider Sigma 7 team, we have 220 risk engineers. We've got in the field security teams. We've got 40 transaction intelligence analysts, as well as 20 resilience and security experts and 20 forensic accountants.
Super strong team, and as we get them working together, they just get more and more powerful together.
So since we've been acquired, we've done development within the platform. So one thing that we've added is a new predictive weather feed. So this is a predictive weather feed which covers severe weather as well as natural disasters. Like historically for Intelligence Fusion, this was a manual process, but there's a key advantage that if you know generally the types of feeds that are out there, the data is great in locations where they're sensor rich. So it's going to be North America, Europe, parts of Asia. The advantage for us now as Intelligence Fusion with a larger team, we're actually reallocating analyst resource to actually supplement this feed. So this should give us one of the most comprehensive hazard incident feeds in the marketplace. But from your perspective, like why was it important for us to include a predictive weather feed in the system?
So great point. And think about what we're trying to do. We're trying to manage a portfolio of risk differently and more effectively. And to me, and we'll speak of it a bit more in a minute, but to me, portfolio of risk doesn't just mean the sites that I own. It includes all those sites I'm dependent upon, both customers and suppliers. And if we can monitor and get awareness of all of our supplier sites into this tool, when you speak of weather, it's easy to say, well, my own plant managers, they know what's going on and they know to call me if something's coming. And I've already hopefully touched them in advance with, hey, perhaps some hurricane training through RSM or others. Suppliers are a little bit harder to visualize. I was talking to one big chem farm company that had 400,000 suppliers around the world. So how do you know where they are if you're probably 3 or 4 people, departments removed from that supplier list? If we had those suppliers loaded, and take some of the examples you give, if there's a major weather event heading up either into the Gulf Coast or into the Philippines, which of my suppliers are in the path? And without something like Intelligence Fusion, I as the risk manager or the business continuity manager, have no way of visualizing which ones are more likely to be flooded. I can't just look at an address list, because chances are I don't know where the cities are. I might know the country and don't know the cities, visually, to say which ones are earthquake or hurricane exposed. But now if we can see with the path of the typhoon, we can look and see that there's 6 suppliers that are potentially exposed by it. And we can ask our supply chain teams to perhaps decide to drop ship and call that guy and that vendor and say, look, put something on a flight, get it to me tomorrow. I'll pay the extra charge. But I want to make sure that if something does happen to you, it's not going to impact my supply chain. And being able to think through those things in advance and let your management know you're thinking through them in advance gives, I think, a lot more credibility to the risk process.
And just as an example of like what one of the alerts looks like, so this is a flood watch. It's not just the reporting of the incident, it's showing the geographical location that's going to impact, but then it'll also actually update the incident as that event changes. So we've just been to Atlanta a few weeks back. We went to the risk management conference, and this is part of the demonstration platform that we're using. So one thing that we've included in the platform, which using our custom fields functionality, is exposure values. So why is that important for users to have the ability to report exposure values on an asset level?
Well, take the historic way. If I were the risk manager or perhaps the security manager and I got a call that something was happening at one of my sites, well, I know the address. I can probably find them in my internet. But what else do I know? The old way, I would have to go to my insurance guy and say, can I get a copy of the risk control report? And then I'd have to go to my submission from last year and see, what did I report for values? And then if the question came up, how many employees work here? I'd have to go to a different submission and find out what we listed if we had it, an employee count. What products are made there? Or something's happened. Do we have a continuity plan in place? And I'd have to go to a whole bunch of different folks trying to find information. Well, by structuring it in a way that we can have, again, one version of truth, and we can upload all the exposure data, we can upload the historic engineering files, the site maps, the business continuity plans, and I know you're going to talk through some more of this in a bit, but how do we make it that it's easy to think about and impact risk quickly and do it in one place that's online so that I'm not scrambling in drawers or trying to find other people who work for me in the brokerage or other places and ask them for my own stuff. So make it easy to find, make it easy to visualize. You've got to, with IF, you can see the actual site image. You can get right to the Google map, but you can also then overlay all the other things you might be worried about in one place.
And bringing it back to the predictive weather. So as an example, say we're reporting a hurricane is going to strike this location in 10 days. You as a user, if you've mapped this as an asset, you're going to get an email notification to say this incident may impact this site. And the risk manager can quickly go into that asset and see, right, these are all my potential exposure values. This is the exposures that I could face from this incident.
Yeah. And what is the training you're going to talk, again, you'll keep coming back to the things that can impact risk. What should we be doing? And if we've pulled all that information together, we're making it easier for our other people in the company to react or pre-act the way we want them to.
And say, for example, it is, kind of running with this thread of some sort of hurricane potentially going to strike a location. If you've worked with RSM and you've produced a business continuity and crisis management plan, again, that's accessible. You've got it 10 days in advance. You can see what you're supposed to do and how you should respond to that incident.
Exactly. And again, what have we thought out in advance, and how do we make it easy for the relevant folks to get access to it?
So from an intelligence fusion perspective, I kind of keep coming back to it. Historically, we were just there to say, this is what's happening. Now, as part of Sigma 7, we can say, right, now this is what you should do. And if this does actually strike this location, we're here to now support you through this process and help you get back to some form of normality.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk to some of the future developments, there's other things, we've got past weather. Right now, we're doing present predictive weather, and we're doing future weather with one of the big insurance companies' tools, so that we can have that full spectrum of past, present, and future risk.
And so one of the exciting aspects of Sigma 7 is the training and e-learning. So, within RSM, there's 400 training modules in 11 languages. It's recognized by 8 external awarding bodies. So if this hurricane we're giving you a notification that it's going to actually strike this location. You then, if you took out the training, you have access to the storms, floods, and tsunamis training, which again is supporting you to actually be resilient against what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
So moving on, like the other aspects, so we built out the functionality to have a document repository across Intelligence Fusion. So as an example, this is a sample report from Paragon, who's the risk engineering company within Sigma 7. Intelligence Fusion will become just a single repository for all of your risk management data, and that could have all your historical risk engineering reports. It could have your security consultancy reports from RSM.
Well, and think of the power, and again, having been a risk manager with a big portfolio, perhaps you made a big investment in 2019 and your insurance company or your risk control engineers did full project and plan review. They wrote letters describing the the protection systems, that they'd reviewed it all, that it was all approved, the installation had been validated by them, and they sent you a report. And that report is probably in someone's email somewhere. Well, 3 or 4 years later, when the question comes up again and said, hey, what was the design that we used for this roof or for this fire protection system? If we've attached a copy of that report into the file for the site, and we've got it with all the other key documents, now it's a simple place of whoever needs it knows where to get it. And it's there, for the future. It's there for answering those questions that are going to come up every time. Same with the property engineering report. What with the last one, I forgot who has it. I lost the email. Or as we just went through an email reconfiguration, I can't find some of my old files. Now I know where to get the last data, and without having burned a lot of paper, because it's all now digitally in the cloud.
So in part, it's improving communications across teams, but also across geographical distances. Like some of the clients we work with, they have multinational operations that are located around the world, and Intelligence Fusion becomes that central repository for intelligence data. What we're seeing is, as part of Sigma 7, it becomes that central repository for intelligence, security, risk data, all within a single platform.
Absolutely.
So that's what we've built so far, and that's all available within the Intelligence Fusion platform now. You can access all of that. So what's coming next from a product development perspective? One thing we found is, and what we're calling this feature is active alerts, is at the moment you can receive notifications via email, but clients want the ability to receive alerts in a variety of different mediums. They want different frequencies as to how they want to actually receive that data. So that's what we're currently building at the moment, what we've called active alerts. So you'll be able to say, right, I want 3 key users to the platform who get access to it. But if this type of incident occurs within proximity of this asset, I want to send 10 WhatsApp messages to these telephone numbers. Or you can say, I want to receive an immediate alert regarding this type of incident, or I want a weekly digest regarding kidnapping, or I want a monthly digest regarding the UK. So we're going to give people complete flexibility as to how they actually want to receive data. So that's actively being worked on. I know everybody talks about ChatGPT, but ChatGPT really is going to revolutionize what we do at IF. At the moment we disseminate 20,000 incidents alerts, which we do through intelligence collection plans with our clients. We disseminate over 20,000 weather alerts, so that's 40,000 alerts per month that we're disseminating. In part, though, the intelligence feed that the analysts do, they are processing that data themselves manually. We're not a purely algorithmic solution, because we don't want people tweeting saying, I'm in the pub having a Jaeger bomb, and that appears as a bombing incident on our platform. So it always goes in front of a human analyst first. So the moment it takes our analysts between sort of 4 to 5 minutes to process an incident, with the use of ChatGPT, we think we can half the time it takes them to do that. So it really is, some quite exciting things that we're doing with these sorts of new AI tools that are out there. And then another part is the organization level content management. So this is the ability for users to create, edit, and delete the likes of threat modules, custom fields, folders, and files, as well as search globally and search within content sections of profile pages. So giving clients, as well as ourselves, the complete flexibility to customize the solution as much as is required. Like certainly what we found in recent years, clients don't want off the shelf anymore. They don't want to have to change their operations to match the intelligence platform. They want the intelligence platform to change to match their operations. And that's what this functionality is going to provide that we're building out. And then some of the other items, so we're creating sector-specific profiles. So initially for the likes of energy, mining, life sciences, and industrial manufacturing. So a completely specific profile with layers and tools that really should serve those sectors a lot more effectively. We're going to improve the news feed that's in the platform, drawing out a lot more data from that, as well as the ability to create a customized dashboard. So again, people are very unique in how they want to look at a platform. They may just want to have a single interface which shows their map in the top right-hand side of an area of the world that they look at. They might want to see their exposure values in another column. So again, any functionality that's within the system, we're going to allow the users to create a completely customized dashboard. Cross-organization access as well is something that we found that we need to create the functionality whereby, say for example, you're working with a vendor in a certain country and you want to give them access, but you only want to give them access to certain elements of your platform, you'll be able to do that with cross-organizational access. And then some of the really exciting parts is the risk priority methodology. So like one of the first projects I conducted when I joined Sigma 7 was a data inventory. So just looking at the data sets that we hold internally, but we also have a lot of intellectual property around the likes of looking at risk and allowing people to understand how they can prioritize it. And I kind of come back to Sigma 7 and what our value proposition is. Through the data sets that we hold within Sigma 7, we help the client to completely understand themselves and their risk profile. And then through some of the intellectual property that's held within Sigma 7 Minds, allow them to really prioritize that risk. So if you do have a budget and you're like, right, how do I spend this budget this year on risk? We're going to give you the functionality that allows you to understand how you should prioritize that. And then the last one is the natural hazard analysis and mapping. So with one of the big insurers, we're just agreeing the contract at the moment to actually build that in the platform as an overlay. Do you want to chat through the advantages of that?
Absolutely. You know, obviously everyone's thinking about this changing world, and 4 years ago we didn't talk about wildfire at all. Today it's something, depending where you are in Europe and in the US, and some very interesting changes happening as we dry out as a world. So how do we think about risks like that? How do we think about the changing hurricane, severe weather, that we're experiencing, leveraging some of the tools that are out there already and doing a great job? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to optimize the use of the wheel. And so in this case, we're partnering with who, many in the insurance world think is one of the best. There's two really good ones, and we've got one of those two that we're going to be leveraging in this, and we'll be telling you their name as soon as we're signed. But how do you think about future risk on your portfolio? How do you look at the world of your suppliers? How do you look at your priority suppliers and say which of them are earthquake exposed? Maybe we should think about changing how we're dependent on that site, or ask that supplier to have some redundancy built in, do some assessment of their continuity plan. How do we think through the portfolio of risk each has? And I think that goes back to some of these other items here, where leveraging the expertise at Sigma 7 and across Sigma 7 into different industry sectors to understand what's a bigger challenge and threat to a certain sector or a certain part of the world in a sector. And how do we think about that risk? How do we do a more customized dashboard? How do we focus that sector-specific risk profile so that we're fine-tuning the things we're prioritizing on? And then how do we have that risk methodology that focuses on what's really important to that industry sector, and then gives a more focused view on where we're prioritizing investment, which is, your money is people's time and money are the two assets you all have to help control risk. And how do you make sure you're deploying that most effectively means you need tools that help guide you. And we want to be that tool. So long journey, but we're getting there. Yeah.
And it feeds into the S7 mission. What we're doing is we're combining technology, processes, and data that serves to fulfill the objective of enabling the simplification, automation, and integration of strategic, operational, and IT risk management across an organization.
Yeah. And if I had to summarize this as 3 words, I'd say we want better risk outcomes. When I worked in the large organization, I worked for the CFO. The CFO hated surprises. So how do we spend our time and our money most effectively to avoid surprises and to get in front of risk and to actually control our risk landscape better? And that's our mission to you, and that's our commitment to you, is that we'll be there to help.
So we have Laura Brown, the marketing director for Sigma 7, is running the webinar. Are there any questions that have came through, Laura?
We have had a few questions, yes, but I do encourage everyone to continue sending them in. If you have any thoughts, questions, feedback, anything on the webinar and what you've just been taken through. But the first one, Michael, or actually Andrew, this could be good for you as well. So this attendee already uses Intelligence Fusion and have done so for many years. They want to know a little bit more about how the likes of Paragon and RSM in particular can help them manage their risk better and further protect their business. They operate in the manufacturing industry, so supply chain risk is quite important for them.
Right. Michael, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the learning curve at Sigma 7 has been huge, but what's been really interesting is just finding out about all these other disciplines of risk. So, understanding that Paragon will send risk engineers out to sites, and they'll do a full survey and audit and actually then produce a risk register in relation to that site, which, so my background is intelligence core. And intelligence core, we're intelligence analysts and we're security consultants. We're kind of double-hatted. So that kind of rung quite true with me, because I'd do exactly the same thing. I'd go out to a site, I'd conduct a security consultancy audit, I'd write a report with recommendations. And that's what S7 Security and Resilience is doing as well. So with the combination of, an audit from Paragon and an audit from RSM, you as a business then will have a risk register which covers the recommendations from both elements. If you can do that on a global scale, you have a true understanding as to what your true risk looks like, but also what, kind of chatting to some of the businesses, there's a lot of siloed activity. The security consultant will work to the security manager, the risk engineer will work to the risk manager, and potentially they don't speak to each other. But some of the areas with which they operate actually cross over. It's looking at things like fence lines and access control and these sorts of things. So there's got to be budgetary assistance by actually doing these audits at the same time or in tandem, and understanding what risk recommendations are being fed to the risk manager and security manager, and actually actioning them as one. And then for us as Intelligence Fusion, it's our job to visualize that data effectively. And ideally, we're going to bring it up into an organizational view, so the C-suite can look at a dashboard and see, right, what does my actual global risks look like?
Well, and I'll come at it perhaps from the top down. If you think I'm assuming that historically more of the Intelligence Fusion customers are from the security side. Super important. Obviously front and center to the C-suite. You've got the risk team. You've got environmental health and safety teams. Usually, you've got other risk disciplines. People like me are used to working with those other risk disciplines, with the CISO to understand cyber risk, with supply chain, with risk management, business continuity, and enterprise risk management. So if we can help you as the security directors engage with those other departments to show the value to them of a tool you already have, and to show how we're extending this to cover things that they're worried about, but they don't perhaps have a very good solution, or they have a solution they're buying off on their own that is only piecemeal. If we can together bring this into one consolidated discussion on risk, now the C-suite up top is going to be much more engaged, because instead of 4 departments going for 4 different sessions with 4 different agendas, you've got one group to get one combined set of players together coming to say, this is how we're seeing our global risk. This is how we're seeing stressors to our business. And these are the things that together we want to do to better manage risk and better protect the stakeholders of the company. You take the Paragon guys, where they're used to going out to the field. Because we work for the client, because we're not owned by the insurance company, we can change our data collection schemes. We can change the reports to capture information that other people in your organization want. We can get that on. We have online, it's an online system for data collection, monitoring, reporting that talks to IF. We can consolidate that all into one process and take advantage of having a trained engineer, boots on ground at your site, get that into the system more efficiently, and then provide a much bigger pool of people with some benefit. Again, always thinking about how do we have a better risk outcome overall, pulling together the different strengths. And then just the last bit of that question, if you take the RSM, historically, if I were the risk manager, I'd have to go to my risk control engineer to say, give me the report. Then I'd have to do some internal workings to figure out who runs business continuity. And I'd have to find out if they had somebody doing business continuity work and see if they knew the data I'd already collected over here. Now, with us bringing these capabilities together, we can have continuity plans tied to the engineering reports, tied to the discussions we've had with security on threats they're worried about, tied to the cyber risk assessments we can do. And all of that now can be one integrated, partnered approach to resiliency.
Thank you both. So we've had another question. They have asked for a little bit more detail on timelines. So they've said that all of these changes sound great, but what sort of timelines are we looking for some of these implementations? Can you just, they appreciate that we can't be, kind of definitive on that, but can we give them a rough estimate?
So, I mean, Active Alerts is ongoing. It's been ongoing for 2 or 3 months now. It's kind of an 8-stage process. I think we're at stage 4. We're expecting to roll that out in about 4 to 6 months' time. I mean, in part, this is the exciting thing about us being acquired by Sigma 7. We have a much larger development team now, so we can run projects in parallel. Like ChatGPT, we've already done a project to show that it works. The next step is actually just integrating it into the technology so that when the analyst is reporting an incident in the platform, they enter the URL and it will do most of the population of the incident form. They then just have to go through and actually check it, make sure it's accurate, but then add their comment and assessment. So the real intelligence part. And bringing the sort of the weight of their knowledge to bear within the platform, which historically we perhaps haven't had the bandwidth to do because we're out there processing all this data. Organization level content management, that's ongoing now. We started that about a month ago, and we're expecting everything that we've said we're building, that'll be in the platform within the next 12 to 18 months.
Thank you, Michael. And another question, so with regards to threat intelligence specifically in the sector, how do you see the USP changing for security professionals in the threat intelligence industry that uses the platform currently with Sigma 7 now on board?
Like the threat intelligence sector, it's crowded. There's a lot of different USPs, a lot of different providers with like different elements that they bring and state, this is why we're unique. For intelligence fusion, where we've always kind of put ourselves was like we didn't want to just throw 10,000 instances at a client every single day and say, right, now you make sense of it. That's why we use intelligence doctrine within the platform. So military intelligence methodology, we use intelligence collection plans. So we'll sit down with every single client and say, right, tell us about your operations, tell us about where you work, what you're interested in over the next 6 to 12 months, and we will then use you as the lens by which our analysts actually look at the world. So initially how it's changing is more on this resource, but then also the ability for us to actually call on the support of the likes of Alico. So Alico, business intelligence, again, another company with multiple languages, lots and lots of experience, some crossover areas where we're both working. So it's kind of integrating some of the stuff that they do within the technology, but there's a whole wealth of knowledge across Sigma 7 with a global footprint as well. We've always been massive about crowdsourcing. So actually getting that, it's all well and good us sort of reporting on an incident in Rio de Janeiro from the northeast of England. It's very different for us to actually say, right, you're from Brazil, you actually operate in Rio. What is it you're kind of seeing at the moment? What's the atmospherics you're getting in relation to it? So it's getting that broader global picture from the wider Sigma 7 team. But in part, the way that I think intelligence fusion is going to evolve is the platform is going to be more about helping the user to understand their own operations. So, mapping out their assets, understanding where their supply chain is, understanding the critical nodes in relation to their supply chain. And then the intelligence feed and the other layers that we bring into it, these are contextual layers that just allow them to understand how the environment around their supply chain, their operations may be impacted. So eventually I see, perhaps the intelligence fusion name not being what we call the platform. It may be the Sigma 7 platform because it's more about that sort of whole risk picture than just intelligence.
Thank you. And Andrew, one for you. So they've asked how you see the platform being used by corporate supply chain teams.
Great question. And I alluded to it a little bit, but to me, this is where the real power of thinking and leveraging the strength of something like IF and the tools we're building around it or the sources we're building for it. Again, back to my example of, another client we spoke to had 20,000 suppliers around the world. They think they had a pretty good, appreciation of which were the 1,000 most important ones. But if you give me a schedule with 1,000 locations on it, one of the fields will be the country. I'm going to have no idea where in the country. So is it in Is it on the Gulf Coast? Is it in Houston, Texas, right on the water, or is it in the middle of North Dakota? I'm not going to really have a good view unless I really know the geography of the particular country. So now, thinking of across a huge portfolio with, again, 1,000 of who are simply priority, how do I know where to worry? And how do I know where to perhaps send my auditors? How do I know where to send my fire protection engineering team, to do an audit of a supplier? How do I know where to change my safety stock so that I actually maybe pre-order at certain times a year when it is more likely to be typhoon or tsunami or windstorm? Or how do I know who's earthquake exposed? Now we have a way to think across our supply chain. We have a way to visualize our supply chain differently. And then, future developments of intelligence fusion, I see us also being able to map supply chains so that you'd be able to look at key products and see how they're flowing around the world. We can map trade routes. If you identify critical ports, let's make sure we're putting critical ports on the path. If you have certain routes you're driving, in the Americas, there's some places, where hijackings are more frequent. In Europe, I remember back when I was living in France, we had a shortage of hard-sided trucks. So we had all soft-sided trucks, and certain trade routes were more likely to be sliced open and products stolen. So how do we start to monitor certain transit routes differently? Again, all in one smart platform so that we're thinking intentionally about our particular supply chains in this case.
Thank you, Andrew. So we have had a few other questions, but I think we've pretty much covered them in some way throughout the webinar. However, we will be following up with you all individually so we can make sure that you did have your questions answered. And for those of you who haven't submitted a question but may think of one, once the event ends, please feel free to get in touch. We encourage you to schedule some time with a member of the team. We want to discuss with you how we can better support you, your business, through those new and upcoming developments that Michael and Andrew have just taken you through. So we're welcoming brainstorming sessions. We want your feedback. We want you to help shape the future development of intelligence fusion. We've always been very client-driven in that respect. So we'll actually send an email once the webinar ends with a link to get in touch with Michael and Andrew. So if you'd like to take us up on that, then we'd really encourage it. Thank you all so much for your time. We look forward to hearing from you and hearing your further feedback on the development of intelligence fusion. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.